From weighing the loss of Canada's measles-free status to resolutions up for debate at this month's UCP AGM and Pierre Poilievre's response to reporters in the wake of caucus departures. Time now for tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Calgary-based public opinion consultant Janet Brown and Duane Bratt, Mount Royal University political scientist. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with Canada this week officially losing its designation as a country that has eliminated measles, an issue we discussed off the top with Dr. James Talbot, a former Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health. Janet, how do you see this reflecting on the Smith government?
Well, I think Dr. Talbot did an excellent job just sort of wrapping up how complex this situation is and how many different factors are at play here. And many of these factors just don't look good on the government. It seems like there has been little effort put into reducing vaccine hesitancy, and it could be argued that, questions have been raised about vaccine effectiveness and safety, and that some of those safety concerns have been fueled. So there's that problem. There's also just a problem with the number of Albertans that don't have a family doctor. And sometimes vaccine hesitancy just comes down to the fact that you don't really feel you have a chance to have a conversation with a doctor. So there's people who are outright opposed to vaccines and the issues that need to be addressed there. And then there's the people that just don't have access to a healthcare provider who can really talk them through the pros and the cons. So as I said, Dr. Talbot really did a good job showing how complex this situation is.
What kind of pressure, Duane, does this bring to bear in how Alberta continues to respond in avoiding future measles outbreaks, even the spread of other diseases typically controlled by vaccine use?
I don't think it will have an impact. It should have an impact. This day was coming. There was a piece in the New York Times where they even got Dina Hinshaw, the former chief medical officer of health, who was fired by the Smith government, to go on the record. I believe that's her first interview, basically talking about how the health professionals are being muzzled here in Alberta. So I don't think it's going to have an impact. It should, but it won't. And there's an element of partisanship here. I recall Michelle Rempel-Garner making the case a couple months ago that this was all due to Justin Trudeau, that it was Justin Trudeau who weaponized vaccines. But that ignores the fact that we're having a disproportionate impact in Alberta. And you need to look at what went on in Alberta with Jason Kenney losing his job over COVID health restrictions and Daniel Smith gaining his job by basically supporting those who had opposed COVID health restrictions. And everything that Smith has done and the UCP has done in the last 3 years is all about righting the wrongs of COVID, including vaccines. And there's more resolutions about vaccines coming forward at the UCP convention.
Okay, well, on that point, UCP members will be gathering in Edmonton later this month for their annual general meeting, and the party has released resolutions up for discussion and for voting on. The list of policy proposals includes the reintroduction of coal-fired electricity, flags to be allowed on public property, and making temporary residents pay for health care. While the Smith government isn't bound by the outcome of party member voting here, members will be watching to see whether the Premier follows through. So, Duane, what maybe strikes you about this list of resolutions this year, and how maybe it builds on past policy pushes from the base?
So I'll try to answer those in reverse order. Typically, I used to always say that there's a huge gap between party resolutions at a convention to the party's election platform to what a government may or may do when it's in office. But the Smith government is very receptive to these policy resolutions. Last year, she introduced legislation in advance of the UCP convention that mirrored many of those resolutions. So the party base has a much bigger impact on Daniel Smith than I think it's had on other premiers, other leaders in other provinces. When I looked at the list, I wasn't surprised at what was on there. I was more surprised at what had been left off, because there had been a vetting process done by the party executive to shorten the list. So they removed more of the, I don't know, crazy ones like investigating chemtrails, merging Alberta with the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. So those were all taken off the list. But most importantly, there is no discussion about independence, no discussion about Alberta sovereignty. And I think that was a deliberate choice. We're hearing that it came down to a one-vote decision on the executive to ignore those resolutions. So I think that may be an undercurrent. But given the context of the Alberta Next panel, given the context of Thomas Lukaszik's petition, given the context of Jeff Rath, I'm surprised that they're not debating independence, but I think the UCP convention people realized it would divide the party, and that was the last thing that they wanted.
Well, Janet, a leadership review, certainly the focus of last year's UCP AGM. Danielle Smith captured that without any difficulty, 91.5% support. To what degree do you see the party leader needing to be accountable to the base this time around?
Well, you have to give Danielle Smith props. She has been skating a very fine line for 3 years now, since she was first elected leader of the UCP. And she has faced the convention a few times now, and we were all very surprised by how well she did in the leadership review last year. So she is doing a remarkable job keeping her very right-wing party base in line at the same time as maintaining her level of popularity within the population in general. And Duane talked about some of these resolutions and how closely they align with the Alberta Next panel. Things like police, pensions, denying medical care to temporary residents, that kind of thing, things that they're talking about at the panel. Now, what all these things have in common is these are things that are very popular among her base, popular among the people who showed up at the Alberta Next events, but they are not very popular in the population in general. So it is just amazing that she continues to be able to give her party the kind of reinforcement that they need to stay loyal to her, but also to keep the public loyal when mainstream public opinion sometimes is so far from public opinion of the party base.
Duane, does that loyalty, though, get tested if we bring it back to your point about independence not being up for debate? Will it not be a central focus of discussion on the floor?
Well, it'll be interesting. I'm sure it's going to be part of the chatter in the hospitality suites and over lunch and over breaks. Are there people on the floor who are going to stand up to talk about item A and try to pivot to item B? And do they get shot down? We'll have to see how this convention gets managed.
All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, Pierre Poilievre goes before reporters for the first time since the departures of 2 MPs. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. Pierre Poilievre is standing firm on his leadership style after 2 MPs announced they were leaving his caucus.
Does this say anything about your leadership? Have you maybe reflected on your leadership style moving forward?
No, my plan is to continue to lead and be the only leader in the country that's fighting for an affordable Canada, where our people who work hard can afford a home and food. That is my agenda.
The Conservative leader and recently elected Alberta MP went before reporters in Calgary on Wednesday. His first such appearance since Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont crossed to the Liberals, and Edmonton MP Matt Genereux announced his resignation. Janet, what's to be made of the message Pierre Poilievre is sending in response to questions about whether or not he's reflecting on his leadership style?
Well, Pierre Poilievre has this playlist of 4 or 5 of his favorite hits, and he just plays them on repeat. And he put this mixtape together back when Justin Trudeau was prime minister. And he just seems to harp on these same points over and over again with no real realization that the world is changing, that the country is changing, that the arena in which he is battling out politically is changing. And he just goes back to the old lines over and over again. So, it's about affordability and it's about the untrustworthy Liberals and that sort of thing. And, he just seems to be unable to reflect on the fact that his performance may have been the reason that the Liberals were able to win the next election, and that his performance is probably the reason that the Liberals may be tempted to have an early election and try and run again.
Duane, authentic, Pierre Poilievre, it is a communication style that worked for him in the past when Trudeau was in the PM's office. Poilievre's numbers were way up.
Yeah, was that due to the style of Pierre Poilievre or to the unpopularity of Justin Trudeau? I think we know the answer to that because Mark Carney is Prime Minister today. Watching Poilievre's press conference, it reminded me of the expression that they gave about the Bourbons after the French Revolution, that they had learned nothing and forgotten nothing. Poilievre did not learn anything about losing the election or losing his own seat or losing 2 of his MPs, but he has not forgotten any of the slights given to him. It was a very combative tone. He wanted to know why the media, including CTV, was not spending as much time discussing Nate Erskine-Smith or Stephen Guilbeault or Jonathan Wilkinson, all of whom have been critical at various times of the budget, but to my knowledge, as of today, have not crossed the floor. Media gives a lot of attention to floor crossings. Just ask, Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould. So it was consistent with what we have seen with Poilievre. There's an expression that he really hasn't changed his views since he was about 17. And that was confirmed again yesterday.
Janet, it's surely, though, to resonate, strike a chord with his base. And is that not important right now where his leadership is concerned?
Yes, but one of the big questions that voters will be thinking about during this leadership is winnability. So there's liking Pierre Poilievre, but there's also liking being in power. And so Poilievre has got to balance those two things. Maybe this is, good in a fundraising letter to the base, but come convention time, people will be thinking about whether this is the right guy to lead us into the next election. And even if you like him, you can recognize how grating other people find him.
Duane, Pierre Poilievre was in his new Battle River Crowfoot riding to mark Remembrance Day, did stops in a couple of communities there, but surprised to see that his first appearance in front of the media in the wake of the 2 departures would come in Calgary, not in Ottawa.
No. He was in town already. His convention is going to be in Calgary. And later today, we're going to have an announcement about the next set of projects that the Carney government is going to support, and I think he wants to be in Alberta for that decision. So no, I was not surprised he was in Calgary.
And Janet, Duane brings up January. What kind of focus does this now put on Pierre Poilievre's leadership review in Calgary?
Well, I think there's still rumors going around. There may be more to come, maybe not floor crossings, but more indications of dissent within the caucus. Of course, we still have to pass the budget, and we'll see if anybody does anything surprising, like break party solidarity, that sort of thing. So, January is not that far off for Poilievre, and he's just got to keep the wheels on the bus. He's got to keep his caucus together, and he's got to think about 2 things. He's got to think about this upcoming convention, but he also has to think about not creating conditions that prompt the Liberals to call an election before the Conservatives are ready to really contend that election.
Duane, no apparent sign of a mutiny, no one appearing to be in the queue seeking leadership of the party. Do you see that changing at all now?
I don't know, but the fact that we're discussing the challenges that Poilievre may face in his leadership review when there is nobody on the other side, this is just some worrisome concerns about Poilievre's leadership. And so that has to be disconcerting to him. Do I think at this stage, will he survive? Yeah, I do, unless we see more MPs walk away.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Michael, Janet.